So we begin. Okay, good morning. We have technical glitches today, so no music to begin. So we're reading in Book 7, the Book of Yoga, Canto 4, the Triple Soul Forces. We're coming to the end at the top of page 520, second line. 520, just at the end of the canto. So just to review briefly, Savitri has heard a voice from the summit of her being, instructing her to go inside and find her soul and to conquer death after she's done that. So she began a search, going deep within, and she passed through various layers of the inner being in her inward journey, going through like the subtle, physical, the vital, the mental realms. And as she approached closer and closer to her soul, she encountered in this canto 3 powers of her soul, the triple soul forces. And they were represented as Madonnas, whom she encountered, 3 different Madonnas. And the first was called the Madonna of Sorrows. And essentially, she brought this power of the soul of compassion for all that suffers. So she brings that into the world. And the second Madonna, soul force, brought strength and power to conquer the obstacles towards the manifestation of the divine. And the third brought light and wisdom and joy. But together with each of these 3 Madonnas, there was a warped echo spoke. These 3 different beings, male voices, which were a perversion of those forces that are operating in the world in the ignorance as it is. So that first brought this sense of kind of tamas, of resignation to pain and suffering, kind of accepting it, even wallowing in the suffering. And the second brought the ego of humanity, that it could conquer all things, conquer nature, and become a master of nature through its own kind of intellect. Is that right? Yeah, that's true. That's correct. So he says things like, "What God imperfect left, I will complete." out of a tangled mind and half-made soul. His sin and error I will eliminate. What he invented not, I shall invent. He was the first creator, I am the last. And then he describes all the things that the human intellect has discovered and invented, and the powers that it has accrued. And then even he says that he will conquer these occult powers and be able to slay his enemies with a look. Omnipotence and omniscience shall be mine. So this is this warped echo of this goddess of strength and power. And then Savitri continued and found this Madonna of light. And this perversion of this Madonna is kind of similar. He says that he has also mapped all of the pages of the evolution of nature. Then he's discovered those things. All matter is a book I have perused. Only some pages are now left to read. I have seen the ways of life, the paths of mind. I have studied the methods of the ant and ape, and the behavior learned of man and worm. If God is at work, his secrets I have found. But he says, but still the cause of things is left in doubt. When all has been explained, nothing is known. So he's still speaking in where we left off. And he kind of continues with this thread that despite all that he has discovered, what humanity has discovered, still nothing is known, and all recedes into a kind of a mystery that's unsolvable. In the end, when we look at matter, at the subatomic particles, it all dissolves into some kind of unknowable energy or probability, and nothing is solid and nothing is sure. And spiritual knowledge also ends in that Maya, some kind of unknowable that cannot be ascertained and has no real relation to our world and our lives and our suffering. Only we can perhaps disappear into that emptiness or that Maya, that unknowable. But it cannot change this world and our life and give it meaning and fulfillment. So let's continue. He just finishes his argument here. We can start with Artam, the second line on page 520.
Nay, let me walk within my mortal bounds. Not life beyond life, no work beyond the mind. Our smallness save us from the infinite. In a frozen grandeur, lone and desolate, call me not to die the great eternal death, left naked on my own humanity, in the chill vast of the spirit boundlessness, each creature by its nature's limits lives. And how can one evade this native fate? Human I am, human let me remain, till in the unconsciousness I fall dumb and sleep. A high insanity, a chimera is this, to think that God lies hidden in the clay, and the eternal truth can dwell in time, and call to her to save ourselves the world. How can man grow immortal and divine, transmuting the very stuff of which he is made? These wizard gods may dream, not thinking man.
Okay, thank you. But just pause there for a minute. So this is his more or less final conclusion, that let me just accept my limitations, let me live within my limits. Why seek for some absolute truth which is divorced from my life and my limits? Ask me not to die the great eternal death, left naked of my own humanity in the chill vast of the Spirit's boundlessness. Don't ask me to leave my humanity and enter into the infinite consciousness of the divine or of infinite existence or non-existence. Each creature by his nature's limits lives, and how can one evade his native fate? Human I am, human let me remain, till in the inconscient I fall dumb and sleep. Let me just remain a human being until my time comes and I sleep in death. He says it's a high insanity, a chimera. Chimera is kind of a fantasy. It's actually a horrible creature of the imagination, which is kind of a mixture of different animals, a lion's head, a goat's body, a serpent's tail. So he says, this is just insanity to expect, to think that God lives in our human clay, in our body, and that eternal truth can dwell in time. That a divine life here in this world is possible. And to call this God, to call her to save ourself and world. How can man grow immortal and divine, transmuting the very stuff of which he is made? This wizard gods may dream, not thinking men. And so next, Sudanya.
And Savitri heard the voice, the rapid answer heard. And turning to her being of light, she spoke, Madonna of light, Mother of joy and peace, thou art a portion of myself put forth to raise the spirit to its forgotten heights and wake the soul by touches of the heavens. Because thou art, the soul draws near to God. Because thou art, love grows in spite of hate, and knowledge walks unslain in the pit of night, but not by showering heaven's golden rain. Upon the intellect's hard and rocky soil, can the tree of paradise flower on earthly ground, and the bird of paradise sit upon life's boughs, and the winds of paradise visit mortal air. Even if thou rain down intuition's rays, the mind of man will think its art's own gleam, his spirit by spiritual ego sink, or his soul dream shut in sainthood's brilliant self, where only a bright shadow of God can come. His hunger for the eternal thou must nurture, and fill his yearning heart with heaven's fire, and bring God down into his body and life. One day I will return his hand in mine, and thou shalt see the face of the Absolute. Then shall the holy marriage be achieved, then shall the divine family be born. There shall be light and peace in all the worlds. End of Canto 4.
Thank you. Savitri's answer is very interesting. And I would like to read a little bit of Shradavan's commentary on this. And here she kind of also summarizes Savitri's encounter with the other Madonnas and their echoes. So she says, Savitri says that it is not by pouring down heaven's golden rain the light and knowledge of the higher level of consciousness onto the hard and rocky soil of the human intellect, that the transformation can come about. She expresses the transformation in three beautiful images. First, the tree of paradise. The tree is the symbol of life. The tree of paradise is the divine life that must one day flower on earthly ground, bringing about the blossoming of life. Second, the bird of paradise, the soul who should sit in the tree of divine life and sing beautifully. And the third, the winds of paradise, which must bring the atmosphere of the higher realms to mingle with the earthly air of mortality. For that to happen, something else is needed. Savitri continues, if you pour down intuition so that human beings become more and more intuitive, the egoistic man of knowledge will just think, oh, that is natural. Of course it is like that, and feel very superior and proud of himself. Instead of opening him to the higher influence, it will weigh down his spirit with spiritual ego. That is the most dangerous form of ego, when we begin to think that we are very special and outstanding beings. Or something else might happen to him. His soul may fall asleep and dream, shut in sainthood's brilliant cell, aiming to be perfectly good and pure and becoming a saint, Sri Aurobindo says, is very limiting. It shuts you up in a narrow cell, a tiny room into which only a bright shadow of God can come, not the full illumination of the divine presence. Even the shadow of God is bright, and a person who reaches that state of sainthood may have wonderful experiences, but as far as the life of the world and its evolution is towards the divine and life, towards the divine life are concerned, his or her influence may be very limited. So what is the solution? Savitri says, his hunger for the eternal thou must nurse, and fill his yearning heart with heaven's fire, and bring God down into his body and life. This is the mission which Savitri gives to her being of light. You must nurse and nourish the human being's hunger and thirst for what is eternal and real and infinite, and fill his yearning heart with heaven's fire. The heart of the human being is always yearning for something, but this soul force can increase the heart's longing for what is higher and truer and more lasting, and fill it with the heavenly fire of aspiration. She must help bring God down into his body and life. In this way, the great change can be prepared. And then Savitri says, one day I will return, his hand in mine, and thou shalt see the face of the Absolute. Again, Savitri makes a promise, saying, as she has said to each of the Madonnas, one day I will return. This time she says, when I have fulfilled my mission, I will come back with his hand in mine. Then you will be able to see the face of the Absolute. Then shall the holy marriage be achieved. Then shall the divine family be born. there shall be light and peace in all the worlds. This is the promise of the union of spirit and matter, heaven and earth, nature and soul. Then the divine family shall be born here on earth, all the children of the divine, living the divine life on the earth. And the light and joy and peace which this Madonna represents will fill not only the earth, but all the worlds. The reign of ego and falsehood shall be ended. There are several places in the poem where Sri Aurobindo tells us that it is the mission of humanity to bring about this change. The soul forces are helping us to fulfill that task. Here we are told that the essential things are hunger for the eternal, the burning aspiration for the divine state, and the bringing down of divine powers into our body and life. Not being content to be an apparent saint or a big spiritual ego, thinking you are better than everybody else. Of course, the Mother has said that nothing depends on human beings. Even if we fail to respond, the divine will and intention are sure to be fulfilled. As we shall read later in Book 11, the poet says that if human beings fail to do their part, a higher species will come and do it anyway. But it is the privilege of humanity to participate in the great change, because as mental beings we have the power of conscious choice, and we can choose to collaborate in hastening the advent of the rule of the divine loves upon earth and the divine life in the material universe. If everything depended on human effort alone, then it probably would not happen. Fortunately, it does not. In the early days of Auroville, the Mother was asked, "Does it depend on us?" She replied, "Fortunately not. Therefore one can laugh." But our souls have accepted to be born into this evolutionary manifestation with a mission. We have agreed to come here for a reason, and we shall feel very sorry if we miss our opportunity to fulfill that mission and that aim. In my understanding, the three Madonnas represent three complementary forces or powers of the divine soul in the manifestation: the divine love and compassion, the divine power, and the divine light of consciousness, acting in the world under the conditions of the earth nature in its present state of evolution, while their echoes, the man of sorrows, the ego of desire, and the man of mind, express the obstacles to the divine working, presented by the inertia, the rajasic violence, and the limited and limiting mentality of the present human nature. The body, life, and mind of humanity. The true nature of the soul is both saguna and nirguna. It contains all possible qualities, but is not limited by any of them. But the powers or forces of the soul acting in the manifestation may represent the three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva in their divine forms. In the lower nature, Sri Aurobindo tells us, sattva is the force of equilibrium and translates in quality as good and harmony and happiness and light. Rajas is the force of kinesis and translates in quality as struggle and effort, passion and action. Tamas is the force of inconscience and inertia and translates in quality as obscurity and incapacity and inaction. Ordinarily used for psychological self-analysis, these distinctions are valid also in physical nature. Each thing and every existence in the lower Prakriti contains them and its processes and dynamic form, and are the result of the interaction of these qualitative powers. So this is a quote from Sri Aurobindo about the gunas. But later in the same book, he writes that in the perfection of the divine nature, what the three gunas stand for are three essential powers of the divine, which are not merely existent in a perfect equilibrium of quietude, but unified in a perfect consensus of divine action. Tamas, in the spiritual being, becomes a divine calm, which is not an inertia and incapacity of action, but a perfect power, Shakti, holding in itself all its capacity and capable of controlling and subjecting to the law of calm even the most stupendous and enormous activity. Rajas becomes a self-effecting, initiating, sheer will of the spirit, which is not desire, endeavor, striving passion, but the same perfect power of being, Shakti, capable of an infinite, imperturbable, and blissful action. Sattva becomes not the modified mental light, prakasha, but the self-existent light of the divine being, jyoti, which is the soul of the perfect power of being and illumines in their unity the divine quietude and divine will of action. The integral perfection will aim at this greater triune unity. And Shraddhavan continues. The outstanding characteristic of the Madonna of sorrows, apart from her divine pity and compassion, which identifies with all the suffering in the universe, is calm, patience, resignation in the face of her main obstacle and limitation, which is her incapacity to save the suffering. She gives solace and comfort, but she says, I have brought no arm of strength to aid or slay. God gave me love. He gave me not his force. She is helpless to change the conditions of the world. In contrast, the Madonna of might embodies dynamism, courage, and forceful action, while the Madonna of light represents the sattvic principle, open to higher levels of spiritual consciousness. The warped echoes represent the gunas as we find them in the lower nature. And the man of knowledge expresses a kind of sattva that is self-satisfied and accepts its own limitations. That is why Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells us that it is good to be sattvic but that we need not stop there. It is possible for the soul to go beyond, to become free of the gunas' limitations and be able to manifest all of them in their full divinity. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't see it as Satyavan, but kind of as God or the divine being. But in the end, she does kind of come hand in hand with Satyavan through the forest. He is saved. So perhaps in some sense, he is transformed, because he's been saved from death.
That transformed soul
Yeah.
that she's talking about here, because he has the aspiration and all the things.
So he's fulfilled in some way.
Right.
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, she's going to come back with that higher divine fulfillment that is maybe represented by the integration and the divine fulfillment of these gunas, their higher divine counterparts. She will come back with that fulfillment, which comes with the supramental force also in the she ultimately also has to go into that supramental consciousness and bring it down. She has to go also into the highest form of the mother, in a sense. And
She goes into her own soul.
yeah.
That connects with his soul. We have the
Right. They're in that highest form of the mother, or maybe not even highest form, but there's a unity of Ishwara and Shakti, his hand in mine.
Define it.
Yeah, one of the things that Savitri is striving for is not simply a individual realization, but also a collective realization for humanity, to rescue the soul of humanity represented by Satyavan. So she's come to bring a transformation of life on earth, and not only her own individual realization. So she wants to bring this divinity to mankind, to achieve here on earth a divine race of beings, a divine family, who will be united in oneness and not as now divided in their minds, in their lives, in conflict, but perceiving their unity in the divine consciousness.
This is where the Father wanted. So
Mm.
he started
Right,
in a sense, and then she is the fulfillment.
exactly.
Discovery,
Right.
and it all connects.
And she's still kind of perhaps discovering all of that, because now she's just at this first stage of discovering her soul, which she hasn't yet. But we'll see in the next canto, which we'll try to read through, that when she finds her soul at the end of that canto, it describes it as kind of a first stage, not as yet the fulfillment, as an individual realization. So even that is still the individual realization, but it opens the way for the collective realization.
That is standing, ourselves shall be one self with all through her. But it's all written small, no? So you can collect this also to this divine family, please?
Well, like I was saying, in that divine family, we will be united. The family will be united, will feel others not as separate beings, but as, let's say, part of themselves. They will feel their essential oneness. Now we feel separated from one another. We feel some commonality, but, there's this division that's there. In that divine family, there'll be a oneness that'll be very substantial. We'll see a little bit of that, I think, something of what it's like in the next canto, which I'd like to start to read. So I think Margaret is next. So we start with the next canto, Canto 5.
Canto 5, The Finding of the Soul. Onward she passed, seeking the soul's mystic cave. At first she stepped into a night of God. The light was quenched that helps the laboring world, the power that struggles and stumbles in our life. This inefficient mind gave up its thoughts, the striving heart its unavailing hopes. All knowledge failed, and the idea's forms, and wisdom screened in awe her lowly head, feeling a truth too great for thought or speech, formless, ineffable, forever the same. An innocent and holy ignorance, adored like one who worshipped formless God, the unseen light she could not claim nor own. In a simple purity of emptiness, her mind knelt down before the unknowable. All was abolished, save her naked self, and the prostrate yearning of her surrendered heart. There was no strength in her, nor pride of force. The lofty burning of desire had sunk, ashamed, a vanity of separate self, the hope of spiritual greatness fled. Salvation she asked not, nor a heavenly crown. Humility seemed now too proud a state. Herself was nothing, God alone was all. Yet God she knew not, but only knew He was.
Thank you. B.
A sacred darkness brooded now within. The world was a deep darkness, great and nude. This void held more than all the teeming worlds. The blank felt more than all that time has borne. This dark knew dumbly, immensely the unknown. But all was formless, voiceless, infinite, as might a shadow walk in a shadowy scene, a small knot passing through a mightier knot. A night of person in a bare outline, crossing a fathomless, impersonal night. Silent she moved, empty and absolute. In endless time, her soul reached a wide end. The spaceless vast became her spirit's place. At last, a change approached. The emptiness broke. A wave rippled within. The world had stirred. Once more, her inner self became her space. There was felt a blissful nearness to the goal. Heaven leaned low to kiss the sacred hill. The air trembled with passion and delight. A rose of splendor on a tree of dreams, the face of dawn out of mooned twilight grew. Day came, priest of a sacrifice of joy, into the worshiping silence of her world. He carried immortal luster as his robe, trailed heaven like a purple scarf, and wore as his vermilion caste mark a red sun.
Thank you. Next.
As if an old remembered dream come true, she recognized in her prophetic mind the imperishable luster of that sky, the tremulous sweetness of that happy air, and covered from mind's view and life's approach, the mystic cavern in the sacred hill, and knew the dwelling of her secret soul, as if in some Elysian occult depth, truth's last retreat from thought's profaning touch, as if in a rock temple's solitude hid, God's refuge from an ignorant worshipping world. It lay withdrawn even from life's inner sense, receding from the entangled heart's desire. A marvelous brooding twilight met the eyes, and a holy stillness held that voiceless space. An awful dimness wrapped the great rock doors. Carved in massive stone of matter's trance, two golden serpents round the lintel curled, enveloping in with their pure and dreadful strength, looked out with wisdom's deep and luminous eyes. An eagle covered it with wide conquering wings, flames of self-lost, immobile reverie. Doves crowded the grey musing cornice, like sculptured postures of white possumed beasts.
Thank you.
Across the thresholds asleep she entered in, and found herself amid great figures of gods, conscious in a stone and living without breath, watching with fixed regard the soul of man, executive figures of the cosmic self, world symbols of immutable potency. On the walls covered with significant shapes, look at her the life scene of man and beast, and the high meaning of the life of gods. The power and necessity of these numberless worlds, and faces of beings and stretches of world space, spoke the succinct and inexhaustible hierarchic message of the climbing plains. In their immensitude, signing infinity, they were the extension of the self of God, and housed, impassively receiving all, his figures and his small and mighty acts, and his passion and his birth and life and death, and his return to immortality. To the abiding and eternal is their climb, to the pure existence everywhere the same, to the sheer consciousness and the absolute force, and the unimaginable and formless bliss, to the mirth in time and the timeless mystery of the triune being who is all and one, and yet is no one but himself apart.
Thank you.
There was no step of breathing man, no sound, only the living nearness of the soul. Yet all the worlds and God himself were there, for every symbol was a reality and brought the presence which had given it life. All this she saw and inly felt and knew, not by some thought of mind, but by the self. A light not born of sun or moon or fire, a light that dwelt within and saw within, shedding an intimate visibility, made secrecy more revealing than the word. Our sight and sense are our fallible gaze and touch, and only the Spirit's vision is wholly true. And thus she passed in that mysterious place through room and room, through door and rock-hewn door. She felt herself made one with all she saw. A sealed identity within her woke. She knew herself the beloved of the Supreme. These gods and godnesses were he and she. The mother was she of beauty and delight. The word in Brahma's vast creating clasp. The world presence on Almighty Shiva's lap. The master and the mother of all lives, watching the worlds their twin regard had made. And Krishna and Radha, forever entwined in bliss, the adorer and adored, self-lost and one.
Thank you.
In that last chamber, on a golden seat, one sat whose shape not vision could define. Only one felt the world's unattainable fount, a power of which she was a straying force, an invisible beauty, goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is a beam, a greatness without whom no life could be. Thence all departed into silent self, and all became formless and pure and bare. Then through a tunnel dug in the last rock, she came out where there shone a deathless sun. A house was there, all made of flame and light, and crossing a wall of doorless living fire, there suddenly she met her secret soul.
Continue.
And a being stood, immortal in transience, deathless, dallying with momentary things, in whose wide eyes of tranquil happiness, with pity and sorrow could not abrogate. Infinity turned its gaze on infinited shapes, observer of the silent steps of the hours. Eternity upheld the minute acts, and the passing scenes of the everlasting play, in the mystery of its selected will, in the divine comedy or a participant, the spirit conscious representative, God's delegate in our humanity, comrade of the universe, the transient ray. She had come into the mortal body's room to play at ball with time and circumstance.
Thank you.
A joy in the world, her master movement here. The passion of the game lighted her eyes. A smile of her lips welcomed earth's bliss and grief. A laugh was her return to pleasure and pain. All things she saw as a masquerade of truth, disguised in the costumes of ignorance, crossing the years of immortality. All she could front with a strong spirit's peace, but since she knew the toil of mind and life, as a mother feels and shares her children's lives, she puts forth a small portion of herself, a being no bigger than the thumb of man, into a hidden region of the heart, to face the pang and to forget the bliss, to share the suffering and endure earth's wounds, and labor meet the labor of the stars. This in us laughs and weeps, suffers and stroke, exults in victory, struggles for the crown, identified with the mind and body and life. It takes on itself their anguish and defeat, bleeds with the fates, weeps and hangs upon the cross, yet is the unwounded and immortal self, supporting the actor in the human sense.
Thank you.
Hail, immortal and striking soul, hail the magic transformation spirit, the rush into each other.
Thank you.
Oil. In the muttering night amid the rain-swept woods, and the rude cottage where she sat in trance. That subtle world withdrew deeply within, behind the sun veil of the inner side. But now the half-opened lotus bud of her heart had bloomed and stood disclosed to the earthly ray. In an image shown revealed her secret soul. There was no walls severing the soul and mind, no mystic fence guarding from the claims of life. In its deep lotus home her being sat, as if on concentration's marble seat, calling the mighty mother of the worlds to make this earthly tenement her house, as in a flash from a supernal light, a living image of the original power, a face, a form came down into her heart and made of it its temple and pure abode. But when its feet had touched the quivering bloom, a mighty movement rocked the inner space, as if a world were shaken and found its soul. Out of the inconscient, soulless, mindless night, a flaming serpent rose released from sleep. It rose billowing its coils and stood erect, and climbing mightily, stormily on its way, it touched her centers with its flaming mouth. As if a fiery kiss had broken their sleep, they bloomed and laughed, surcharged with light and bliss. Then, at the crown, it joined the eternal space.
Thank you.
In the flower of the head, in the flower of matter's base, in each divine stronghold and nature knot, it held together the mystic stream, which joins the viewless summits with the unseen depths, the string of forts that make the frail defense, safeguarding us against the enormous world, are lines of self-expression in its vast, an image sat of the original power, wearing the mighty mother's form and face, armed, bearer of the weapon and the sign, whose occult might no magic can imitate. Manifold yet one she sat, a guardian force, a savior gesture stretched her lifted arm, a symbol of some native cosmic strength. A sacred beast lay prone beneath her feet, a silent, flame-eyed mass of living force. All underwent a high celestial change, breaking the black inconscience, blind, mute wall of facing the circles of the ignorance. Powers and divinities burst, flaming forth, each part of the being trembling with delight, lay overwhelmed with tides of happiness, and saw her hand in every circumstance, and felt her touch in every limb and cell.
Thank you.
In the country of the lotus of the head, which thinking mind has made its busy space. In the castle of the lotus twixt the brows, whence it shoots the arrow of its sight and will, in the passage of the lotus of the throat, where speech must rise and the expressing mind and the heart's impulse run towards word and act, a glance uplift and a new working game. The immortal's thoughts displace our bounded view. The immortal's thoughts, earth's drab idea and sense. All things now bore a deeper, heavenlier sense. A glad, clear harmony marked their truth's outline, reset the balance and measures of the world. Each shape showed its occult design, unveiled God's meaning in it for which it was made, and the vivid splendor of his artist thought, a channel of the mighty mother's choice. The immortal's will took into its calm control our blind or erring government of life. A loose republic, once of wants and needs, then bowed to the uncertain sovereign mind. Life now obeyed to diviner rule, and every act became an act of God. In the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, love chanting its pure hymeneal hymn, made life and body mirrors of sacred joy, and all the emotions gave themselves to God.
Thank you.
In the navel lotus broad imperial range, its proud ambitions and its master lusts were tamed into instruments of a great calm sway, to do a work of God on earthly soil. In the narrow nether center's petty parts, its childish game of daily dwarf desires was changed into a sweet and boisterous play, a realm of little gods with life in time. In the deep place where once the serpent slept, there came a grip on matter's giant powers, for large utilities in life's little space. A firm ground was made for heaven's descended might. Behind all reigned her sovereign, deathless soul, casting aside its veil of ignorance, allied to gods and cosmic beings and powers. It built the harmony of its human state, surrounded into the great world mother's hands. Only she obeyed her soul's supreme behest in the enigma of the unconscious world. A secret soul behind supporting all is master and witness of our ignorant life, amidst the person's look and nature's role. But once the hidden doors are flung apart, then the veiled king steps out in nature's front. A light comes down into the ignorance. Its heavy, painful knot loosens its grasp. The mind becomes a master instrument, and life a hue and figure of the soul. All happily grows towards knowledge and towards bliss.
A divine presence then takes nature's place and pushes the movements out of our body and mind. Possessor of our passionate hopes and dreams, the beloved despot of our thoughts and acts, she streams into us with her unbound force, into mortal limbs the immortal's rapture and power. An inner law of beauty shapes our lives. Our words become the natural speech of truth. Each thought is a ripple on a sea of light. Then sin and virtue leave the cosmic list. They struggle no more in our delivered hearts. Our acts chime with God's simple natural good, or serve the rule of a supernal right. All moods unlovely, evil and untrue forsake their stations in fierce disarray and hide their shame in the subconscious dusk. Then lifts the mind a cry of victory. O soul, my soul, we have created heaven. Within we have found the kingdom here of God, his fortress built in a loud, ignorant world. Our life is entrenched between two rivers of light. We have turned space into a gulf of peace and made the body a capital of bliss. What more, if more must still be done? In the slow process of the evolving spirit, in the brief state between a death and birth, a first perfection stage is reached and at last. Out of the wood and stone of our nature's stuff, a temple is shaped, where the high gods could live. Even if the struggling world is left outside, one man's perfection still can save the world. There is a new proximity to the skies, a first betrothal of the earth to heaven, a deep concordat between truth and life. A camp of God is pitched in human time.
Thank you. So, let's go back to the beginning. And Sonia, will you read the first part?
Finding of the soul. Onward she passed, seeking the soul mystic cave. At first she stepped into a night of God. The light was quenched that helped the laboring world, the power that struggles and stumbles in our life. This inefficient mind gave up its thought, the striving heart its unavailing hopes. All knowledge failed, and the ideas, forms, and wisdom screamed in awe her lowly head, feeling a truth too great for thoughts or speech, formless, inevitable, forever the same. An innocence and holy ignorance, adored like one would worship formless God. The unseen light she could not claim nor own, in simple purity of emptiness. Her mind knelt down before the unknowledgeable. All was abolished save her naked self, and the prostrate journey of her surrounded heart. There was no strength in her, no pride or force. The lofty burning of desire had sunk, ashamed vanity or separate self. The hope of spiritual greatness fled. Salvation she asked not, nor a heavenly crown. Humility seemed now too proud a state. Herself was nothing, God alone was all. Yet God she knew not, but only knew he was.
Thank you. We'll pause there. So Savitri enters into this very interesting state. It's kind of a state of darkness, but it's a very special, holy kind of darkness. She puts down everything that she's used before as supports. Her knowledge, wisdom, her strength, maybe even her love and worship. All of these recede, and she feels their inadequacy. And so they just kind of recede away, and she's faced with this unknowable something which she realizes, holds within it perhaps the secret that she's yearning for. But she doesn't know what it is. She can't identify it. It's just a state of being confronted with some infinite which she cannot describe or know or feel. In a simple purity of emptiness, her mind knelt down before the unknowable. All was abolished, save her naked self and the prostrate yearning of her surrendered heart. There was no strength in her, no pride of force. The lofty burning of desire had sunk ashamed of vanity, of separate self. The hope of spiritual greatness fled. Salvation she asked not, nor the heavenly crown. Humility seemed now too proud a state. Herself was nothing. God alone was all, yet God she knew not, but only knew He was. So this is what Savitri faces after encountering these Madonnas, these powers of her soul. So we'll continue from there next time. So thank you. Maybe we just have 2 minutes of silence since we don't have any music.